Greetings from beautiful Topsail Island in coastal North Carolina. I want to welcome you to our Financial News You Can Use weekly TV program, hosted by yours truly, Wayne Isaksen. To say that the world is in a time of flux is a huge understatement. All around us, there is a paradigm shift going on. One with the weather, also with the world economies, and thirdly, with the awakening of the masses. It's almost like a huge curtain is opened to reveal the secrets that were once hidden, much like the Great Oz of the movie The Wizard of Oz. Today's show will focus on personal finance, your personal finance. We have with us a gentleman who is a certified financial advisor, and he will add some clarity to the cloudy economic environment that we all must maneuver through. As I was looking through the myriad of news stories for this week's show, I came across an interesting interview conducted by Alex Jones of InfoWars, and he was talking with Pastor Lindsey Williams, who was privy to information about the big oil companies in Alaska. And the insight he gives us is positively bone-chilling. To give you the Reader's Digest version of this story, let's go back to the 1970s. The U.S. made a deal with the Saudis to produce their oil. In exchange, the Saudis would purchase our debt, as in treasury bonds. As time passed, America made some huge discoveries of oil around the Yellowstone Park area and also up in Alaska. The deal was that they would keep this secret and not exploit the oil. Almost 2 years ago, they engineered a huge run-up in the price of oil to $148 a barrel to shock the Americans at the gas pumps. Then, in an even more unlikely move, they dropped the price back down to $34 a barrel, where they wanted it to stay for the next 2 years. Well, that time is over, and now the U.S. and its secret allies are engineering chaos in the Middle East to raise the price of oil to over $200 a barrel. Today, the price is firmly above $105 already, and we are going to screw the Saudis by collapsing the dollar. They will be totally pissed off at us, and they're not going to sell us any more oil. That's when we're going to open up our reserves to supply our own oil to America. But the catch is, at that time, the price of oil is going to be $7 to $8 a barrel. This will take place by the end of 2012. Please look at the links I have provided for more information. And this picture tells the whole story of what's coming. It is important for people to understand the very dynamic changes taking place in our world and to be flexible enough to make changes to ensure your financial well-being. Neal will ask Matt some interesting questions, and I am sure we will learn some valuable tips about the personal financial planning business. Before we get into that, let's start with this week's financial news you can use. Well, I don't get any pleasure out of reporting the truth on this show. I have come to the conclusion that the news shows on TV are feeding us what the government wants us to hear. Have you heard the news lately? The stock market is absolutely soaring, and according to the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve, we are in the beginning stages of a robust economic recovery. Yippee! The S&P is up 6.8% so far in 2011 alone, and the stock market recently hit a 2.5-year high. So shouldn't we all be celebrating? Well, if the stock market performance was an accurate measure of economic health, then Zimbabwe would have had one of the healthiest economies on the entire globe during the last decade. But just like Zimbabwe's stock market was artificially pumped up with funny money, this was rapidly being devalued. So is ours. All of the quantitative easing that the federal government has been doing is pumping plenty of money into the financial markets and is helping to inflate a false stock market bubble. But it is doing very little to alleviate the suffering of the U.S. middle class. In fact, when you take a closer look at the numbers, you quickly find out that a suffering middle class is getting even worse, much worse. According to Gallup, the unemployment rate is now over 10%. The number of Americans that have given up looking for work recently set a new all-time record. The number of mortgages in foreclosure tied a record high during the fourth quarter of 2010. Gas and food prices are rising rapidly. The number of Americans on food stamps continues to increase every single month. Yes, right now the economic situation is not in free fall. It was a couple of years ago. We should be thankful for that. Periods of relative stability, such as we are enjoying now, will be fewer and far between in the future. The bubble of economic calm is a great opportunity that we should be taking advantage of. However, those that are hoping that this is an economic turning point and that things will be back to normal soon are going to be greatly disappointed. This is about as normal as things are going to get ever again. Even during the time of relative economic stability, the U.S. middle class is being ripped to shreds. If there are those among your family and friends that are somehow convinced that the U.S. economy is recovering, you might want to get them to watch this show. According to Gallup, the U.S. unemployment rate is currently 10.3%, but when you add in part-time American workers that want full-time employment, that number quickly rises to 20.2%. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the number of job openings in the United States declined for the second straight month during December. There are currently more than 4 million Americans that have been unemployed for more than a year, and the number of Americans that have become so discouraged that they have given up searching for work completely now stands at an all-time high. Gasoline prices in the United States recently hit a 28-month high. As I said before, by 2012, expect to be paying $7 to $8 at the pump. During the fourth quarter of 2010, 4.63% of all U.S. home loans were in foreclosure. That matched the all-time high, and it was up significantly from 4.39% in the third quarter. It is estimated that there are about 5 million homeowners in the United States that are at least 2 months behind on their mortgages, and it is being projected that over 1 million families will be booted out of their houses this year alone. Almost 14% of all credit card accounts in the United States are currently 90 days or more delinquent. The average credit card rate in the United States has increased a whopping 13.44% at the end of 2010, and the average household debt in the United States has now reached a level of 136% of average household income. In China, that average is only 17%. New home sales in the state of California were at the lowest levels ever recorded in the month of January. And 43% of all mortgages in South Florida are currently underwater. 1 out of every 7 Americans is now on food stamps, and 1 out of every 6 elderly Americans lives below the poverty level. Most unemployed Americans are not lazy. The vast majority of them desperately want jobs, but the U.S. economy is not producing nearly enough jobs today. As noted above, the U.S. economy currently has about 3 million job openings, but approximately 20% of the workforce wants to find full-time work. The demand for jobs is far, far greater than the supply. The middle class in America is being ripped to shreds right in front of our eyes, and very little is being done to stop it. Desperation is rising across the nation. More Americans slip into poverty every single day. It is almost as if a cloud of gloom and despair has descended upon the U.S. economy, and every single month the situation only seems to get darker. Well, that's enough of that. The next story is posted over at businessinsider.com. The Providence, Rhode Island School District plans to send out dismissal notices to every one of its 1,926 teachers, an unprecedented move that has union leaders up in arms. Since the full extent of the potential cuts to the school budget have yet to be determined, issuing a dismissal letter to all teachers was necessary to give the mayor, school board, and district maximum flexibility to consider every cost savings option, including reductions in staff. State law requires that teachers be notified about potential changes to their employment status by March 1st. You can't make this stuff up. My last story comes from CNBC, of all places. The Bulls and Bears agree muni default risk is greater than ever. The world's debt and crisis have become terribly associated with each other over the last few years. We have had a mortgage debt crisis, a sovereign debt crisis, and now a lively debate over the likelihood of a municipal debt crisis. Everyone agrees that the muni debt is undergoing a serious and perhaps permanent change. Muni debt was once viewed as almost risk-free. Now even those who advocate investing in muni debt acknowledge the very real credit risks, as PIMCO put it in their most recent note on munis. The debate is underway about likely severity and scale of muni defaults. Or more precisely, we have a debate about how fairly priced the debt risks inherent to muni credits. On one hand, there are analysts like Meredith Whitney and hedge fund managers like Jim Chanos who warn that investors are taking on way too much risk for much too little return. Whitney has predicted a wave of defaults that could be in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Ouch! And let's conclude financial news we can use with a couple of great quotes. This one is from the great American president Thomas Jefferson. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. Wow, think about that. Consider this idea. That quotation should be repeated every day by our teachers to our school children. And this picture says it all. The next quote I have is from the great Jim Sinclair of jsmindset.com. I can sum up the past days by saying that the changes in the Middle East are world changes, which are not going back to pre-event normal. The change in the Middle East is going to accelerate the impact of peak energy production as a major economic force. Gold is strong against a weak cyclical background, which assures that as the cycle changes, an explosion in price will definitely occur. 1650 gold is in the bag. Literally. That's it for today's installment of Financial News You Can Use. Let's take a short break, and we will return with Neal Whittington and his guest, Mr. Matt Brenneman.